They're in our clothing as symbolized by this ribbon. Clothing. I'm going to sew it Those on the right side over the heart. I think I write some lefts and stuff in this context everywhere. But it goes on the side over the heart for parents and on the other side for anybody else.
What honor tear first?
No, you put it on first and then you tear it. Always get your right stuff because it's a right one face on it. So it's just over your heart. Over your heart. Because it's in my heart. Oh, this is my heart on the left. I'm going to say it back. Left side of the heart for parents, right side for others.
Oh, right.
side.
Oh, so now it's
The right side for others. So it's in my right side. I really could understand. She said left side. No, this is over. The left side over the heart for parents. Is that the left side?
No.
That's the right side. You're right first. The right side over the heart.
50%.
Left side over the heart. So I said. Right, so tear from the bottom. Yeah. Probably tear it out. Yeah. That's fine. If she can get this lid on here. Please make sure that all cell phones are set to silence. It's not plugged into anything. It's not going to do anything. We are here today to say goodbye to Carol Plotkin, Sarah Bat Avraham Vasara. One very important person is not with us here this morning, and that is Carol's older son, Stephen. Stephen spent the whole week before Yom Kippur here with his mother. When he reached Los Angeles, he tested positive for COVID. It is heartbreaking to lose one's mother. To not be able to come to the funeral is even more heartbreaking. Stephen knew that he could not come and expose others to COVID. He would not endanger anyone. He is also sick and still testing positive. He very much wishes he could be here with us in person, but thank God for technology. Everyone should know that he is with us on live stream, watching every minute, and he sent words that will be read later in the service. From Isaiah, Kol Omer Kra, Va'emar Mayakra, Kol Habasar Chatzir, V'chol Chasto, Katzitz Hasadeh, Yavesh Chatzir, Naval Tzitz, Ki Ruach Adonai Nashva Bo, Achen Chatzir Ha'am, Yavesh Chatzir, Naval Tzitz, Udvar Eloheinu Yakum Leolam. Kirachem av al banim, rachem Adonai al yireav, ki hu yada yitzrenu, zachur ki afar anachnu. Like a parent merciful with children, is God merciful with us, knowing how we are fashioned, remembering that we are but dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish like a flower. The wind passes over it and it is gone, and no one can recognize where it grew. But the Lord's compassion with us, God's righteousness to children's children, remain age after age, unchanging. We are all destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Cry for the dead. Hide not your grief. Do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memories be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. Let us not seek to understand what is too difficult for us, nor search for what is hidden, nor be preoccupied with what is beyond, for we have been shown more than we can comprehend. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore, are our few days in eternity. The good things in life last for a short time, but a good reputation endures forever. Cantor. Psalm 121.
Shir lamalot, esaheinai el harim, mehain Yahbohezri, mehain Yahbohezri, Ezri mehim Adonai, ose shamayim v'haaretz, Aliten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisroel, Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, Al yad yeminecha, Yom hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yareya v'agba halayla, Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai yishmar tzedcha u'va'echa me'ata Yad Olam.
Psalm 15. O Lord, who may abide in your house, who may dwell upon your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong others or bring shame upon others, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere the Lord, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who never take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. I would like to invite Michael to say a few words about his mother.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Today, we're here to say goodbye to my mother, Carol. Sorry. She was a loving, caring person who considered her children and her grandchildren her greatest accomplishment in life and deeply cherished her entire family. When she was younger, she was a skier and she jogged around Lake Scranton occasionally, and she was never intimidated by these highly physical tasks. I recall a story she would tell me that was when we were installing a pool in our backyard, a portion of it needed to be dug out, and she got in there and dug it out herself by hand with a pick and shovel. Those types of things, they never stopped her. She went directly towards them and did them. She was motivated like that to tackle any challenges like that, do it herself head on. She enjoyed music and sang from a very early age. Originally as a child, trick-or-treating, and then later in a 50s band with the Gales, later in the Temple Choir. And if you happen to mention a song lyric in normal conversation, she couldn't help but then start to sing that song back at you. So if you said something like, "Your cat looks like a tiny lion," you would probably get a verse or two of "The Lion Sleeps Tonight" after you said it. It was something that she always did. She couldn't stop. And it was always very entertaining. It was nice. She was honest. She spoke directly. And if she had a strong opinion on a subject, she told you. She spoke her mind. I have a couple of stories to tell you about her that kind of give you a little bit of context, a little bit of color. They'll show you what I mean. The first story I thought of, I called the wrestling story. When I was younger and I was on the wrestling team in high school, my mother insisted that she show up to attend every single one of my mates. And this was not because she really liked the sport. I don't think she liked it at all, but it was because, and the way she put it was, she wanted to be there when I broke my neck. And she said it just like that. Not if you broke your neck, but when. So she could be funny like that, but if it was funny, it tended to be funny kind of by accident in that sort of way. So the other story that came to me was something when I was thinking about it, I realized that I had never told her this story. And I think that I haven't probably told too many people this story either. I guess I call this story the beer story. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would sometimes sneak beer around, and generally we had problems hiding it. And so we all took turns where to hide it. And it depended on, your father's out of town, this and that. So every once in a while, when it was my turn, she caught me every time. Every single time. I never told her that, but she was 5 for 5 for catching me with this. She had like a sixth sense for it, and I never figured it out. I never figured out why or how, but she could do this. And of course, my friends lost confidence in me and holding it. So, but I think what that tells me is that she was very intuitive. She could be very intuitive and insightful. She saw something that you didn't think she was perceiving, and I always thought that was a real strength of hers. It was very subtle. It was a very subtle story, very subtle strength. My last story is a little long. I call it "Why I Got a Cell Phone." So when I lived in Connecticut, I was working at this large company, and I had to travel out of town for business. And I told my mother about this upcoming travel, but I forgot to tell her the specific dates. And so for whatever reason, I forgot to call her before I left. And at the time, I didn't have a cell phone. I only had a landline at the house with an answering machine. And about 5 days into this trip, I got a strange call from my manager from work, and he tells me, "Your mother's looking for you. You better call her." And so I called her from the hotel, thinking something might be wrong. And we spoke, and I said, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "Yep, everything's fine. I just want to know where you were." Okay. We hung up, and that was it. And so when I got back to work, what I found out was that she didn't know where I was, and she didn't know where to call. So she called the company's headquarters, and they weren't sure if they were dealing with a missing person or something else. So this cascaded down from a director and a site head and a manager, and eventually a manager that eventually called me. And so whenever I saw these managers at work, that's exactly what they say. "Did your mother get in touch?" Like, I was a director, and say, "Did your mother get in touch with you last week?" I was like, yes, she did. Thank you. I appreciate that. And so on top of that, when I got home, on my answering machine were a bunch of these messages and missed calls. And one of them was this really serious voice that was like, "Mr. Plotkin, this is Officer so-and-so from the Connecticut State Police. Could you please call your mother?" So I was like, so I think what this story shows you is that she had this unstoppable love and concern for people. And it was relentless. It was completely relentless. That's okay. And so, we all loved and admired and respected her so much. And we're going to miss her. And we're going to miss her terribly. And we will keep her in our hearts for a very long time.
Michelle, would you like to say a few words?
So Stephen's in Los Angeles with COVID. I'm Stephen's wife, and I have the great honor of being Carol Plotkin's daughter-in-law. Kendra's daughter-in-law. She was very happy to have daughter-in-laws after having 2 sons for so long. As Rabbi Spitzer said, Steve was here last week, and he was here for Rosh Hashanah, and then he flew to Los Angeles for Yom Kippur with my family, and then wasn't feeling well, tested. He was the only positive test. Jillian and I packed our suitcases and one suitcase full of COVID tests and flew out here. Steve's heartbroken. He couldn't be here today. He did send a eulogy, and I will do my best to convey his feelings. These are his words. And thank you for being here and for all of your support, your text messages and phone calls and everything. This has been really hard for everybody. All right, these are Steve's words. My mom was a singer. She sang her whole life, and she remained lifelong friends with her bandmate in the Gales, Paulette. I'll always remember her singing melodies and harmonies to old doo-wop songs. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of oldies music and an autobiographical trivia of people and local events. My mom was also a homemaker who could fix anything mechanical. I remember lawnmowers on their side with blades and belts being replaced, outlets rewired, and pool heaters and water pumps in various states of repair. Rabbi Spitzer knows this story. I guess Steve shared. There was a time when the gas was shut off, and Steve and I'm speaking of Steve, I unwisely and unwittingly let the service worker in our house when they came by when I was home alone. I was probably around 10 or 11. He went down to the garage and did some modifications to lock off our gas supply. Apparently, the bill hadn't been paid, so he was turning off the gas. After yelling at me to never let a stranger into the house under any circumstance, my mom went down to the garage and proceeded somehow to undo their work and turn the gas back on. I'm pretty sure she took over paying the bills from that point on. Michelle, I told Steve that in our 19 years of marriage, I never needed to call an electrician to fix anything at our place. I would call Carol for help, and she could talk me through any issue over the phone. I'm not sure what I'm going to do now. This is back to Steve's voice. My relationship with my mom evolved and matured over the decades to follow. I had the privilege of being with my mom in her last days before she passed in her sleep in the early morning hours of October 12th. I'm so glad I got to do this. That is, to spend time with her every day until the end. The first night, my flight from the West Coast arrived around midnight. She was in the Elan nursing home where she was in hospice. I was worried about her condition, that it would deteriorate, and the window of opportunity I had to talk with her was closing. When I arrived in Scranton, I decided to go straight to the nursing home first thing before I even checked into the hotel. Well, we started talking around 12:30 a.m. and ended up talking until 5:30 a.m. that morning. That was how it was between me and Mom. That was our relation. That was what our relationship had evolved to. Often I would go on long rants about random current topics like the Israel-Palestine conflict, and she would just listen. I think she enjoyed it. I decided I would ask her questions about her life. I recorded on my phone. This is what I asked. What do you regret most about your life? She mentioned two things. The first was about her father, who died of a heart attack in front of her when she was 15 years old. At the hospital, the nurses were convinced he was drunk, and my mom's family couldn't convince the nurses that he was in grave danger. The family knew something was seriously wrong because his chest was in pain. Her regret was not being able to find some way to stand up to the hospital staff, to advocate better for him, to save her father's life. She began to get gray hair after that. I suspect this marked the end of her adolescence and the beginning of her adulthood, independence, and financial responsibility. The second thing she mentioned was about her husband, Richard, who died of complications from a stroke this past November. Well, it turned out that when he was having that stroke 2 years earlier, he called her. I don't know why he didn't call 911, but instead he called her. And I think that says a lot. They were divorced for years at that point. But he couldn't speak because of the stroke, although she didn't know that at the time. So when she saw his number and answered the phone, there was no one on the other end. She thought he butt dialed her and hung up. She couldn't have known otherwise. He was on the floor for almost 2 days when my cousin Robbie found him. He never really recovered from the stroke. She regretted that, not realizing somehow that he was in danger, and if only she knew, she would have saved him. I told her there was no way she could have known. She says she doesn't blame herself, but only wished it could have been different. Those were the regrets she mentioned. On the recording at this point, I noticed that I paused. Wait, what about you? I said. This was about regrets in your life, and you haven't mentioned your own life, only about the times you tried to save other people. She didn't really know how to answer then. She said, I guess I don't have any. I decided to ask my next question what she thought her biggest accomplishment was. She didn't hesitate. She described me and Michael, our education, careers, and accomplishments, our children, her grandchildren. She eagerly wanted us to be successful in our lives and to live without regrets. Mom was a favorite patient with the nurses. One of them told me she was one of their 2 favorite patients. They thought all her little mannerisms were charming, and they seemed impressed by her positivity in spite of her situation. I was struck by this. I was struck by this as well. She had a natural inner strength and inner confidence that never seemed to fold or cave in, no matter how dire her health was. I saw her hold on to this optimism in the face of debilitating medical conditions as the illnesses wore her down. First, it was multiple sclerosis. She'd fall again and again. She nonchalantly accepted the repeated falls and the bruises all over her body to preserve a sense of normalcy within her home. She carried on with graceful denial and without complaint. At one point, it became hard for her to walk, and she knew something had changed. Once she was at the ER, they found that one of her kidneys was completely infected beyond saving and needed to be removed. As chance would have it, I was already on a plane traveling to Scranton at the time because my father's health was failing. I wasn't expecting my mother's health to be in such dire straits as well. Mike and I asked the doctors if there was anything we could do. I guess we were desperate to feel that life and fate could somehow be molded by our will. He looked us in the eyes and said one word: pray. They took out the kidney. She lived through the surgery and, in typical fashion, shrugged off the idea of needing 2 kidneys. But nature was not done with her, and it didn't end there. She was shortly thereafter diagnosed with cancer. Maybe it led to the kidney infection, and she began chemotherapy, but her body couldn't bear it. After weeks in and out of the hospital, blow came with spinal stenosis, which stole what was left of her movement. Her spirit was unbroken. Amazed me. It in a sincere and natural testament to a soul that decline over the next week. Initially, wanted to come out. The morphine had dulled the pain. I asked if she thought about Richard. She told me she heard his voice all the time. Once when their nurse came in to administer the morphine, my mom said, "I'm not alone. My husband is here and my son is here." At one point, she said, "I'm so sorry I'm leaving you with such a mess." I tried to console her. I said, "You're not at all." The day before her last, she seemed to rally. The hospice care worker said she was communicating. It sounded like she was getting stronger. They gave her a dry bath. I had arranged a care worker to spend time with her and help feed her every day. I was at the airport when the care worker texted and told me she ate all her food, all her pudding, half her carrots with cranberry sauce, and 4 to 6 ounces of fluid. She said they were getting to know each other. I flew back to work on the West Coast, expecting to return in a week or 2. That was the evening she passed. The nurses told me it was in her sleep. I didn't expect it. I feel relief and guilt at that relief that her suffering did not linger any longer. Love and will alone cannot conquer nature. There's a poem that says, love is not all. It is not meat nor drink, nor slumber, nor a roof against the rain. Love cannot fill the thickened lung with breath, nor clean the blood, nor set the fractured bone. But if I could, I would have atomized myself to go through every capillary of my mother and clean her blood and purify it and cure it from its disease. And I'd reset her nerves and her bones so she could move again. I would bring her back to the time she said she felt the prettiest, back when she was a singer in a band in high school. So she could have one last memory, one last experience of a time when she was young and strong and beautiful.
I can catch up my papers with yours.
Oh.
Paulette, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning. My name is Paulette, Carol's best friend. I met Carol in high school, and I had already formed a group called the Gales, and one of the girls left the group, and I asked Carol if she would like to join our group, and she said, I'd love it. And it was wonderful because we blended so well. So she would come over my house for practice and everything, and that's how she met her husband, Dick. I met Dick when I was 14, probably right before I met Carol. And they met, and the rest is history. Two beautiful boys, beautiful grandchildren. We remained friends forever, but sometimes, you go your way, they go their way, and, then you get back. And then I shouldn't tell this story, but I have to because Carol and I talked about this story probably right up until a month before she passed. But Tommy Genova was a singer around the area, and Dick was managing him. And his first record was Just to Be Loved Again. So being that I had my group, we did the harmony behind Tommy Genova. So he was doing a big, they called it record hop, whatever, up at Laceyville. And we had the 45 to that song. We were all going to pantomime to the song. So the place was packed. Tommy Genova was loved. He was so handsome. And the song actually would start out with Dick playing the piano, and it would sound like da 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 da. And then the girls would all come in with Just to Be Loved Again. And then Tommy would start singing. Well, we get all set, and there's four of us in the horseshoe, and I'm across from Carol. And I shouldn't tell this. But anyway, the song starts, the record. And all of a sudden the record went, ja, ja, ja. It stuck. And we didn't know what to do. And Carol and I took one look at each other, and the other two girls, and that was it. I hate to say it, I peed all over the stage. But Carol didn't. Oh my God. We laughed so hard. They had to close the curtains right away. But anyway, that's one of our younger stories. And then, later on in years, we got together, and we called it a dinner club. There's about 7 of us who would go out once a month. And I'd pick Carol up and put her walker in my trunk, and we'd go, and then I'd take it out and I'm going with it. And she's there, wait. I said, oh my God, I forgot Carol. So I'd wheel it back. But anyway, she really enjoyed that. And then, I guess, she got ill and all this came about, and I would go up to Elan and, I would visit with her and bring her some goodies. And then I would call her and she wasn't answering the phone. So I went up there. It was a week ago, Sunday, and I was with Michael and Kendra. And I didn't want to admit to myself, but she looked frail and weak. And then when she mentioned morphine, I don't like to, how can I say it? Admit to it. You know what I mean? I said, no, that's not Carol, because she was strong. She used to fall all the time. She'd get back up and everybody's panicky, oh, I'm fine. And she was very, very strong. But, and then I called up, I think maybe a day or 2 before she passed, and I called the nurse's station, and I said to the nurse, I said, hi, this is Carol Plotkin's friend, Paulette. Would you please tell her I love her and I'll be up to see her soon? And then Michael called me not long after that to tell me she passed. But thank you for letting me speak today about my best friend. And all I could say is I love you, Carol, and keep singing. Thank you.
The holiday of Sukkot begins this evening. Perhaps you have seen the sukkah huts built all over town. Perhaps you even built one of your own. The key characteristic of a sukkah is that it is temporary and that its roof is porous. As the seasons turn from autumn towards winter, we sit in the sukkah and thank God for the harvest bounty. When the raindrops start falling on our heads, they keep falling, and we go inside. When it clears up, we go back outside, towel in hand, ready to dry the chairs on the table and to sit again in our sukkah. Carol's life was like the sukkah. She suffered from MS for a great many years, including the years before the disease was diagnosed, when she did not know why she had such symptoms. The MS made things hard for Carol. She never got to visit her beloved Israel, for example. She never made it to Vancouver to visit Stephen, Michelle, and Jillian. Travel was just too difficult. But if she could not travel, she could use the phone. If she could not visit Israel, she could look at pictures, read articles in the paper, and relish the stories of those who did go. Carol did not complain. She just took out her towel, dried off the table and the chairs, and kept going. I met Carol in person. I had spoken to her on the phone several times before that. One day when I was visiting Richard, I knew right away that here was a person who was capable and dependable, even though she had her own health challenges. As we have heard, when Richard was having a stroke, he didn't call 911, he called Carol. And that was a pattern in their lives. Carol was practical and capable. She kept things working. And you already heard this story, but I'll tell it again. Stephen recalls one time that the gas bill was not paid. Okay, let's face it, Richard had not paid the gas bill. and the gas guy came and turned off the gas. Stephen was home alone and let the gas guy in. When Carol came home, first she lectured Stephen on the dangers of letting a stranger in the home when nobody else was there. That was the first priority. Then she went downstairs, looked at what the gas guy had done to turn off the gas, undid it, and turned the gas back on. And then, of course, she paid the bill. Carol had a knack for fixing anything mechanical. She loved to do it. It was fun for her. Perhaps mechanics runs in her family. Her brother Stephen was a mechanical engineer until he retired. Carol just had a natural inclination to fix things, a natural curiosity for how things work. Carol bore most of the responsibilities for raising the family and of launching the boys. She cared tremendously about ensuring that Stephen and Michael were educated and prepared to make their way in the world. She did a good job of that. Both boys have excellent professions, and she was very proud of their careers. She also had a protective streak towards her boys. Both of them felt it. Mike said that when she was in your corner, she was really in your corner. And he felt like she was in his corner, especially those times that she was called to school for a conference for one reason or another. After she spoke to his teachers, they invariably understood him better. She got results. She had his back. Once when Mike was, you heard the lead in for this story, but not this story. Once when Mike was in middle school and Stephen was in high school, Carol went on vacation for a week and left the boys alone. As a rule, Carol did not go on vacation. This was completely unprecedented. So, of course, the boys decided to have a beer party. The house was trashed. It took them 5 days to clean up from that party, but they did a great job and they were confident when she came home. She walked in the garage door, immediately saw the one crumpled red cup that they had missed under a chair and said, "You had a party." They couldn't put one over Carol. Carol and Richard became best friends after their divorce. They visited each other. They talked all the time. They were confidants. Think of that sukkah again. Judaism was very important to Carol. She was proud of being a Zionist. She and Stephen watched recorded Rosh Hashanah services this past week and thoroughly enjoyed the singing and the experience. Carol kept a kosher home when the kids were growing up. In the first grade, Michael had a daily sandwich trade with another student who apparently liked kosher corned beef. Michael loved the sandwiches he got in return. His mother never made anything like that. And when Carol found out that Michael was trading her sandwiches for ham, the family would attend Shabbat services every Saturday morning and the Minyaneres on Sundays. This was all Carol's doing. She was fully engaged and into it. And some of Stephen and Michael's best memories are of celebrating Seder with the entire family at Papa Joe's house on Clay Avenue. The cousins would goof around and laugh until they exploded, sometimes literally. One of her brother Stephen's favorite and happiest childhood memories is of singing 3-part harmony with Carol and their older sister Jule in the back seat of their car when traveling with their family. And then he adds, of course, that was when we weren't squabbling. Carol loved to sing. And as we know, Stephen is not the only one here today who remembers singing with Carol as a child, or at least as a young person. Her lifelong friend Paulette, as we heard, was in a 1950s doo-wop band called the Gales with Carol. They sang 4-part harmony, 4 girls together, and that was also how she met Richard. He wrote music and songs for the Gales. Carol kept singing her whole life. She sang in Cantor Wolkenstein's choir at Temple Israel until her health did not allow her to do so anymore. But like the sukkah after the rain, She sang around the house. Anytime words in a conversation reminded her of lyrics, she would burst into song. She would call the grandkids and sing to them on their birthdays and other occasions. Carol loved to sing. I consider myself blessed that I got to know Carol. I always enjoyed visiting with her. I found her interesting, engaging, and self-reflective. Not so long ago, I visited with her when she was in the hospital, and she told me that what she really wants is to vote before she dies. I'm pleased to report that that was arranged, and she did indeed vote, and that meant a lot to her. Sometimes it rains in the sukkah. And then here comes the sun. Carol had her share of difficulties and challenges. She took them in stride, handled them without complaint or bitterness, and then resumed eating in the sukkah, whether it was then sunny or cloudy. Her sons, Stephen and Michael, her daughters-in-law, Michelle and Kendra, her grandchildren, Jillian, Caleb, and Una, her brother, Stephen, her many nieces and nephews and grandnieces and nephews, many of whom are here today, her best friend, Paulette, the staff at the Jewish home, and many other people will miss Carol. But when the sun comes out in the sukkah, we will remember her and think of the songs she sang and the lessons she taught, and thus will her soul be bound up in the bonds of life. Amen. Psalm 23. Back and forth.
Mizmor David, Adonai roi lo exar.
Eternal God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want.
Bi yodeshe, yar bitzaini, al mei menuchot yanaleini.
You make me lie down in green pastures, you lead me beside still waters.
Nafshi yeshoveif,
You restore my soul.
Yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo.
You guide me in paths of righteousness for your name's sake.
Gam ki helech b'getz al mavet.
Yes, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
Lo irara ki ata imadi.
I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
Shivdecha u'mishamtecha Eima yenachamuni.
With rod and staff you comfort me.
Tavarach lefanai, tavarach lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai.
You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies.
Dishamanta v'shemen, dishanta v'shemen roshi. Kovasi revaya, kovasi revaya.
You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows.
Artov, v'abacheveset, iredefoni, kol yemei hayai.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life.
Veshavti bebeit Adonai לאורך ימים.
And I shall dwell in the house of the eternal God forever.
Amen.
If you are a designated pallbearer, please come forward. If you are not a designated pallbearer, but you would like to be a pallbearer, also come forward. I think we're slightly short. Anybody can be a pallbearer who has the physical strength. Men, women, Jews, non-Jews, anybody who has the physical strength can be a pallbearer. Please remain in the room until the casket has been escorted out. The interment will be in the Temple Israel Cemetery, and if you would like, you can join the funeral procession in the front. Because of the upcoming holiday of Sukkot, there cannot be much Shiva. Visiting hours will be observed at the home of Rabbi and Karen Pollock, 724 Winola Road, Clark Summit, today from 3 to 5 p.m. Pallbearers, come forward and please rise.
Et yishmabar Sarah bad Abraham v'Sarah shegalcha b'val olama began Eden dehem menuchatat ana balgamim hasiraga beseder kadafega leholamim וצרור בזרור גם את נשמתה, אדוני ונחלתה, ותנוע בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
El Malay Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Carol Plotkin, Sarah, Bat Avraham Vasara, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that Carol find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. The pallbearers together. Again, everybody stays in the room until. Yoshev Beseter Elyon, Betzel Shaddai Yitlonan, Omar Ladonai Maxim Sudati Elohai Eftachbo, He who Yatzilcha Mipach Yakush Midever Havot, Evreto Yasechlach, Betachat Knafav, Datzet, Sina Uskora, Amito, Lo Tira Mipachad Laila, Meflusia Ufyoman, Midever Baotal Yeholech, Mikedev, Yashu, Sohoraim. Yipol Mitzika Elef Urbava Miminecha Elecha Lo Yigash Rak Beinecha Tabit Veshilu Makrishaim Tirek Yatarai Masi Elyon Samtam Meonecha Lo Tune Elecha Ra'av Neva Lo Yiprav Lo Alecha Kimalacha Isabella Lishomercha